Is Africa poor because of colonization? This is a question that so many people have tried to answer in different ways. And one of the people who have answered this question is my beloved sister. I do not know her name. Forgive my ignorance there. I am going to play her video clips shortly so that we can all go through and we can all watch, and so that then I can give my perspective.
To get this right.
Yes.
And so what's the consequence of that? And what does right mean?
What they have understood, what these countries have understood, is that economic freedom is at the center for prosperity building. Rwanda, for example, Paul Kagame, the president of Rwanda, is explicit about it. He said he wants to be the Lee Kuan Yew he wants to be the Singapore of Africa, and Lee Kuan Yew is his model. Now, the dirty mouths are gonna start shouting, oh yeah, see, authoritarian, blah, blah, blah. Whatever. Me, I want to talk only about the on the economic side. If you take Lee Kuan Yew and Singapore as your example, then it means that, like him, you're going to have to be serious about economic freedom. And that's exactly what he did. That's what Singapore did. When Singapore figured that out, they went on to put in the right reforms to make their environment some of the most business-friendly environments in the world, one of the most free markets environment in the world, and you saw the magic of Singapore. Today, Singapore is richer than its ex-colonizer, Great Britain. So when I hear people telling me today, oh, Africa is poor because of colonization, I'm like, please, let's move on from that. Does it have maybe a tiny percentage in where we are today? Maybe, and I don't know. But I know it's not the cause. Because if it were, many countless countries have been colonized before. And by the way, colonizing one another is humanity's history. It just happened that maybe Africa has been one of the last, colonized region in the world. So in our psyche, it is there, and it acts like nothing happened before to others. But flash news, it's the history of the world. We've been capturing each other back and forth, all of that. So anyway, but the truth is, Singapore, richer than Great Britain today. And then Hong Kong happened. And then because Hong Kong happened, China even today happened. Because China's like, wait a minute, what went on over there? And then China went on to do the exact same thing with its SEZs, the special economic zones, some of the most free market zones in the world. And then look at it happen in communist China, who, when it comes to economics, decided that we're going to do the free market, we're going to be capitalist, because that's the only way. We tried everything else. We killed hundreds of millions of people, and we have nothing to show for it. But now that we're tired of being disrespected members of society, because guess what? That's the other thing too. You want to be respected in this world? You're going to have to be among the prosperous ones for other reasons. Would it be nice, G, that we respect people just because? Absolutely. But that's really not the world we live in. So when China got tired of being disrespected, they're like, maybe we got to build also some prosperity here, because then they're going to hear us. And today, China, being one of the, being where it is at, even Hollywood, who tries to tell the world how to think, is being told by China what movies to make and how to tweak stories and history in order to be palatable for them. You see the power that comes with being prosperous.
First of all, the first thing I want to talk about is she undermined the effects of colonization to Africa. The effects of colonization to Africa are real. In as much as we should talk about Africa taking the responsibility of its circumstances that I find herself in today, we must also be honest enough and discuss the facts of the matter, that colonization had a great impact on Africa and the historical atrocities that had happened to Africans, including slavery. But it doesn't help that we sit back and cry. That's where the side of responsibility kicks in. But she undermined the effects of colonization, and so many leaders have spoken about neo-colonialism, the idea of neo-colonialism, which simply states that colonization did not end. Africa is still colonized in large parts today. So many writers and so many leaders have spoken about this topic, especially Kwame Nkrumah when he wrote the book Neo-Colonialism, the last stage of imperialism. He spoke so much that Africa is not free. Africa has not freed herself if she is not dependent on herself. Africa cannot make her own decisions. Africa is still very much dependent on the colonizers the people who have colonized Africa before, they just shifted. They realized they force and using a military to take control of Africa is no longer viable, because Africa has stood her own ground and fought back for her own liberation. But then they changed form. Neo-colonialism simply means it's just a changed form of colonialism. If you look at what's happening in the Sahel region with the French, it's only of recent where these new leaders have emerged and stood against the French. But they, with the French Pact, the post-colonial pact, it simply means that whole region was still under the colonial rule of France, but in a different way, in a subtler way. So Africa, without being in control of her own destiny and control of her own resources and control, making her own decisions, Africa cannot declare so free. She mentioned countries like Singapore and China. I do not know the details. I did not research much about Singapore. I'll be happy to come back and make a separate video about Singapore. But with the Chinese, we cannot make any comparison with between the Chinese and Africa. The Chinese are free. If we want to talk about freedom, the Chinese are an independent state. They stand for themselves against everyone else. What Victor Gao said, if you do anything against the Chinese government, the Chinese are a sovereign state in terms of technology, in terms of manufacturing, in terms everything. The Chinese stand on their own. They are a country of their own with little to no Western influence. But Africa is open to business. Everybody can influence and do whatever they want in Africa. The Chinese doesn't depend on foreign direct investment much from the West. Chinese does not depend on foreign aid such as Africa. And I mean, Africa is, as soon as they are threatened that we are going to pull out our foreign aid to Africa, everybody coffees. If a giant like South Africa, one of the big threes in Africa, is affected or is dependent so much on foreign aid to the point that they cannot make their own domestic policies, their domestic policies is influenced by the Western powers, by America, because and they depend so much on the foreign aid. Yes, Africa needs to take responsibility, because at the end of the day, like we always say, I mean, so many leaders have said the same thing. Paul Kagame has also said the same thing. We cannot play the victim for a long time. Being colonized on its own, it means Africans are weak. It means Africans are cowards. There is the idea that there is neo-colonialism is because Africans are cowards and Africans are weak, because we allow these things to happen to us. If you look at the French Pact, the post-colonial pact in the Sahel region, former France colonies, you ask yourself, which leader in their right mind would sign a pact like this? What is your freedom then? What independence have you obtained then if you still sign to do all these things to your former colonizers? If you look at the world politics today, it simply shows you that there is no mercy in the world. Everybody is out for themselves. Everybody is out for their own interests. America and the Western countries are protecting their own interests. If you look at the trade wars between China and America, it can tell you that the world is ruthless. You have to stand for yourself. Crying and begging like what Africa does not help. They do not care. They're not gonna stop. We can complain all we want and blame them and point out all the terrible things that they do in Africa, but they do not care, and they're not gonna change unless if we stand for ourselves and be able to change this. The world is player versus player. If this is what they need to get ahead, they will do it, and they will keep doing it. They will keep influencing our politics. They will keep sponsoring wars in Africa. As long as us as Africans, we do not stand up and stop being cowards, the world will never listen to us. The world owes nobody. The world does what the world does. This world is not fair. We can say this is not fair and that is not fair. It's never fair, and they do not care, and they're not going to listen to us. Respect is earned, not demanded. We must earn our respect within the world politics. Both the abuse and the abuse play equal roles. The one who is abusing is obviously morally wrong, but at the end of the day, the one who is also being abused, they are being abused because they are weak, because they cannot stand for themselves. Remember, Africa is not a minority in the world. Us as black people, we are not a minority population that we can complain and say that they are taking advantage of us. We are almost 1.4 billion people in the world. We are a significant population, but it's just because of who we are as black people, weak people, cowards, and people who can be bought, people who can be influenced. We have leaders who are actually puppets, betraying their own people, doing the bidding of the enemy, doing whatever the enemy asks of them because they are given money, because for their own self-enrichment. What independence do we claim that we have if we do not have our sovereignty, if we cannot make policies that favors our own people? Like what Paul Kagame once said, Africans, we do not learn. We do not learn lessons. I do not know what is wrong with us. We keep on doing the same thing over and over again. We keep on depending on this foreign aid, knowing that for very well this aid that we are being given is because they want to control us, because they want us to be dependent. We sit comfortably depending on the West to take care of us, to take care of our own people, to feed us. The West to help us fight diseases, as if we are not capable of doing our own things, as if you must learn. Let's take a decision and stop all these aid things so that we can be able to stand for ourselves, so that we can able to find our own means, so that we can cure our own problems and feed ourselves and take care of our own economy.